Welcome into the Solo Shot Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Dom Manna. Happy Solo Shot Saturday, everybody. Before we get into today's show, I just wanted to take a moment and recognize Cooperstown's newest Hall of Famer, manager Jim Leland, who was elected with 15 out of a possible 16 votes by the Contemporary Errors Committee that was voting on executives, umpires, and managers. Unfortunately, Lou Piniella, who I said was a shoo-in, who I did a whole Throwback Thursday topic on, fell one vote short for the second time, pulling the Dick Allen treatment from the other era committees of the past, where a player who falls one vote short didn't get in the next time around. So Lou Piniella, unfortunately, will not be joining Jim this time around in Cooperstown. But in a couple of years, Lou will have another shot. Jim Leland, though, just as deserving, a guy who is also a three-time manager of the year, a guy who is right behind Lou Piniella with the 18th most wins ever by a manager with 1,769, a man who coached the Florida Marlins to their first ever World Series title in 1997, a team that was brand new, only a few years old at the time, and a guy who also later in his career went back to the team that drafted him as a player. He never made it out of the minor leagues, but he won 2 pennants with the Detroit Tigers in 2006 and 2012, managed a ton of amazing players from Barry Bonds in his time in Pittsburgh starting out to Gary Sheffield and Miguel Cabrera during those Marlins days. Then he had a brief cup of coffee with the Colorado Rockies where he managed Todd Helton and Larry Walker. And then in Detroit, ended up getting Miguel Cabrera again, Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, and company. A guy who's known for his cool demeanor in the clubhouse, a guy who is notoriously smoking stogies in a lot of the pictures of him. It was no shock to me that he got in. I thought Piniella was the lock, and then it was between him and Joe West for that last spot. Leland got a ton of support. Joe West didn't get enough support to be named as a guy with votes. The only other player, person on this ballot that got over 5 votes was Bill White, who I talked about briefly, a man who had an amazing little playing career with the St. Louis Cardinals mainly, and was the president of the National League, the first African-American manager of a league in baseball history, a guy who was a baseball lifer. He's 89 years old, so seeing him fall 2 votes short was really unfortunate as well. If the committee got together beforehand and planned on who they were going to vote for, we could have seen 3 people get in with Piniella and White just missing. Unfortunately, it'll just be Jim Leland from the Era Committee this time around. But 3 years, hopefully Bill White and Lou Piniella will stay healthy and be with us and have a chance to go in. This committee will just continue to get loaded, though, because Dusty Baker is going to be on it next time around. Bruce Bochy is likely to be on it next time around if he retires. And Terry Francona is also going to be on it. So it's going to be difficult for, I think, both Piniella and White to get in while they're still alive. But anything can happen with the Baseball Hall of Fame. And these era committees are trying to get living people in if it's possible. So congratulations, Jim Leland, one of the great managers of his generation. I found it very interesting that they also included in his little write-up for his candidacy that he was the first manager for Team USA to win the World Baseball Classic. So I'm going to be very intrigued if that goes on his plaque, because that could also mean now that the World Baseball Classic, as electric as it was over the summer, over the spring, could end up playing a role in Hall of Fame voting. Maybe not a major role, but just something that could end up sticking in people's minds when they consider you for the Hall of Fame. And I think international baseball is something that the Hall of Fame is really lacking. And I think that by including the World Baseball Classic in the Hall of Fame conversation could be a really nice change of pace going forward. So Jim Leland gets in here pretty much unanimously. He was 1 vote shy of unanimous. But it was shocking to me that Joe West did not receive 5 votes on that committee. I think that it was very telling that the one game that Joe West was ejected from was a game that he ended up getting into a little shoving match with Joe Torre, who was on this committee. So it is possible that Joe Torre brought that up in the conversation and steered people who were thinking about voting for Joe West away from it. But Bill White, Lou Piniella just missed. Jim Leland already has his Hall of Fame jersey, and it'll be really awesome to hear his speech in the next summer. The Shohei sweepstakes had a big day on Twitter the other day, and I gotta say, I think baseball Twitter, we really outdid ourselves. People were making a mountain out of a molehill, and it was really entertaining to follow. I didn't repost any of it because, to me, if there's no concrete evidence, uh, no official report that someone's signing or being traded, I just don't put enough stock into it. I've been fooled so many times, whether it's Arson Judge going to the Giants, um, or things that have happened over the years that have been reported wrong or too early. And there was supposedly a private flight for Shohei Ohtani to go visit the Toronto Blue Jays. You know, he's wanted to keep things quiet. And that ended up being Robert from Shark Tank's plane, who he didn't want people knowing where he was going. And then they made a big stink after the fact about Yusei Kikuchi, a Japanese player on the Blue Jays roster, booking out a fancy sushi restaurant that evening. And everyone just saying, oh, that must mean he's entertaining Shohei and showing him a good time in Toronto. It was for Kikuchi's wife's birthday. It was her favorite place. And as we continue to sit here waiting for the big domino in Shohei Ohtani to fall, we have gotten to the point of just totally reaching. It's because there's that language barrier, and it's because he wants his meetings so private that baseball writers and reporters were just grasping at straws. I'm not saying that he won't sign with the Blue Jays. It was a team that I haven't talked about yet, mainly because I really don't want him to go there as a Red Sox fan. But it just is amazing that the lengths that people go to off little pieces of information that aren't even official. And it was funny that it came out with the tweet that Shohei Ohtani is not in Toronto. He is not on a plane to Toronto. He is in his home in Southern California. And it really just put everything into perspective. You saw some accounts that were known for some credibility, kind of leaning into this as well. And I'm not saying that Shohei Ohtani won't end up being a Blue Jay when everything is all said and done. But I think we all need to just calm down a little bit. It's December. There's still a lot of things to happen. I understand that Shohei's market is holding up probably 5 to 8 teams in terms of them spending on other hitters and pitchers. That is very true. But there's still another 22 to 25 teams that aren't in the Shohei sweepstakes that can be making moves. And I think that's what we need to focus on. I think that's what the winter meetings needs to accomplish. And they finally did that with the biggest move so far this offseason. Juan Soto was traded. Now, this is a guy who, since he came up at 19 years old, has been talked about as the next Ted Williams, a guy who has an amazing eye for the strike zone, incredibly patient for a young player, a guy who walks a lot, gets a lot of hits, can hit to opposite field, power, contact, etc. And he is a stud. There is no arguing that. I have always been someone that pushes back on the Ted Williams talk, not just being a Red Sox fan. If you objectively look at Ted Williams, that's a high marker for anybody to reach in a single season, let alone a career. Let Juan Soto be Juan Soto. And Juan Soto got traded by the Nationals, a team that tried to give him this nice looking deal on the outside that had a lot of deferred money wrapped underneath. They didn't end up working something out. They traded him to the Padres, and they got a nice little haul, including an amazing young catcher and their number one prospect at the time, Mackenzie Gore. So it was a winning trade for the Nationals to get rid of a guy who just didn't want to sign there for monopoly money, essentially. Then the Padres decide, hey, we have Machado, we have Tatis, we have Soto, we're going to go for it. And they have one of the most disappointing seasons in franchise history. And everyone knew Juan Soto was going to get traded. Was it going to be at the deadline last year? Was it going to be during the offseason? He was going to get moved. And it was official that Juan Soto was traded to the New York Yankees along with center fielder Trent Grisham, a guy who's now also on his third team in his young career, to the Yankees for pitchers Michael King, Johnny Brito, Randy Vasquez, Drew Thorpe, and catcher Kyle Higashioka. Now, that was an interesting move to me. Now, because Kyle Higashioka is a catcher that Garrett Cole was very fond of, the guy who just won the Cy Young, and you're paying a ton of money. But when you have an opportunity to make Juan Soto, Kyle Higashioka is not going to hold that up. And you look at Michael King, who's someone who's going to slot somewhere in the 3 or 4 role in the Padres rotation next year. He's a guy that hasn't gotten the opportunity to be in a starting rotation and pitch 30 starts. He's got amazing stuff. I think his elbow is something to be mindful of, but it's not something that would upset me when you're literally trading a 1-year rental. But the big deal here was Drew Thorpe, who, according to MLB Pipeline, is the Yankees' number 5 prospect and their number 1 pitching prospect. I commend the Yankees here. Even though they're trading for Juan Soto on a 1-year rental deal, they obviously want to extend Juan Soto. That is the ideal goal. But they did so without trading one of their top 3 prospects, who are all young outfielders with great potential. So going down to your number 5 prospect and trading Kyle Higashioka, Michael King, and Drew Thorpe, who has starting potential as well. I think this was a nice return for the Padres, who tried to win with Juan Soto's manageable young player contract. But now, when it's time to get off the pot, they got a nice little return. Losing Blake Snell this offseason, they were able to bolster both their current rotation with Michael King and their future rotation with Drew Thorpe. So they could have probably gotten more, but the teams that were in it for Juan Soto, knowing what it's going to cost to extend him, plus having to give up a top 5 prospect, plus the Yankees were one of the few teams that fit that bill, and they got it done. Yes, is it unfortunate for all of us that are not Yankees fans to have Juan Soto be a New York Yankee? Absolutely. But objectively, taking my Boston fandom out of it, Juan Soto and Aaron Judge in the same lineup is going to be a lot of fun to watch. Lefty, righty, you're not going to be able to bring in a lefty specialist or a righty specialist to get through that part of the lineup. And Juan Soto in the bandbox that is Yankee Stadium, I think he'll have the opportunity in this year, whether he signs there forever or is just a one-and-done Yankee, to have a really awesome year in that Yankee Stadium bandbox with the shortened right field. Juan Soto has the chance to put up a career year, and I'd have every expectation for him to, because even if he doesn't agree to an extension with the Yankees before the season, he has a lot to play for. This is a guy who arguably could be a $500 million player, and he has to prove it. This is a guy who he's had a Gold Glove season in the outfield. That's not his strength. He's been an amazing hitter. He's been very streaky at times. He's had really slow halves and really hot ones in the past. But Juan Soto in Yankee Stadium, that's going to be a lot of fun to watch objectively. Am I excited about Juan Soto being traded to the Yankees and Shohei Ohtani possibly being a Blue Jay as a Red Sox fan? Absolutely not. But that's what happened, and it's exciting. And this is what the winter meetings was missing. I know a lot of people are just there meeting with young, old friends, making small deals about guys that they're giving up on, like the Alex Verdugo trade and the Tyler O'Neill trade that both affected the Red Sox plans this winter. But seeing a big move happen at the winter meetings, like Juan Soto, a generational hitter, getting moved, that's really exciting. And whether we get the Shohei news by the end of the weekend or not, I expect this winter meetings to be looked at as one of the best in the last 3-4 years. And that's saying a lot because they really need to bring the winter meetings back to being the belle of the ball in baseball. Now, here at the Solo Shot Sports Podcast, we like to throw it back down the third base line to a moment in sports history, whether it be an impactful moment, an amazing player, or in this case, an amazing trade. We just talked about Juan Soto, a very young and talented hitter, generational guy, getting moved for some pitchers. And on this date in 1965, the Cincinnati Reds decided to make a trade that altered their franchise's trajectory and also the trajectory of the Baltimore Orioles as they traded star slugger Frank Robinson to the Orioles for Milt Pappas, Jack Balchun, and outfielder Dick Simpson. December 9th, 1965. This trade is considered one of the worst in Major League Baseball history. And it's adding insult to injury here because the reason this trade was made was because Cincinnati's general manager, Bill DeWitt, was on record calling Frank Robinson an old 30. This is a guy who won a Rookie of the Year and an MVP in Cincinnati, put up with incredible racism and hardships, did not get along with the media, and still performed. And you're wondering, oh, did Frank Robinson in 1965 have a bad season that kind of leaned into the fact that he could be an old 30? Well, in 1965, Frank Robinson batted .295, 33 home runs, and 113 RBIs. I don't see anything old about that. 13 stolen bases, too, for a guy who wasn't a tremendous base stealer. So Frank Robinson gets traded to the Orioles. And how does he decide to make it up to the Reds? Well, in his first season with the Baltimore Orioles, he led the league with 122 runs scored, 49 home runs, 122 RBIs, and a .316 batting average, not only winning the American League Triple Crown, but also winning the pennant for the Baltimore Orioles and the World Series in his first year. This was a guy who, in 7 seasons in Baltimore, was part of 4 pennant-winning teams and 2 World Series champions. Frank Robinson, for all intents and purposes, is one of the greatest players to ever put on a baseball uniform. This is a guy with 107.3 career WAR, just under 3,000 hits, 2,943. When he retired, he was third all-time in home runs with 586. A .294 career hitter. Still the only player to this day to win the MVP in both leagues. He did so in 1961 with the Reds and in that Triple Crown first season with the Orioles in 1966. He was a Rookie of the Year in 1956. He was a 14-time All-Star, won a Gold Glove, was a World Series MVP, an All-Star Game MVP, and wasn't just baseball's first Black manager, but also won a Manager of the Year. An all-time inner circle baseball legend. And he doesn't get talked about enough. My friends in the card hobby know that his card prices just don't sit there with the other outfielders of his era. The Mays, the Clemente, the Aaron. And maybe he is a tiny peg behind those guys in terms of career achievements, and definitely more than a peg behind them in popularity. And it makes you think, well, there was those other very talented outfielders in that day, but also the fact that his last name is Robinson. Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier and was an extremely popular player. when he first came into the league. And then when he moved to Baltimore, yes, he was a Triple Crown winner and helped them get over the hump right away. But Brooks Robinson was the man in Baltimore. And he played second fiddle as the other Robinson in the clubhouse. So this is a guy who has one of the most popular last names in the Hall of Fame, and a guy who kind of gets talked about in passing when he is an inner circle legend. So just wanted to highlight him. Check out his baseball reference page if you're not super familiar with Frank Robinson, one of my favorite players of all time personally. And a historic blunder on December 9th, 1965, trading future Hall of Famer Frank Robinson to the Orioles for a couple pitchers that never worked out and Dick Simpson. As we round things out here on the show, there was a move that happened that I feel like is getting very little attention, and it comes here after I talked about the Diamondbacks trading for Eugenio Suarez from the Seattle Mariners, a guy who played all 162 games, gives power and pretty decent defense at the third base spot for the Diamondbacks. But they went out and they signed free agent starter Eduardo Rodriguez to a 4-year contract. This is a team that I was screaming from the hilltops during the trade deadline. Gallen and Kelly are great. They need a third starter. Marcus Stroman would be great. And they finally have their third starter. I know they had that amazing run, and Brandon Pfaadt stepped up as a young player in those big moments and gave them quality innings. He did. But Brandon Pfaadt was not the number 3 starter that the doctor ordered. Having a 1-2-3 of Gallen, Kelly, and Eduardo Rodriguez with Pfaadt as your 4, now you're starting to talk an actual team that can win the World Series, not a team that sneaks in there. And the Snakes continue to be sneaky. This is a team that makes the World Series for the first time since 2001. And I think adding a starter like Eduardo Rodriguez, one that has playoff experience, part of the 2018 World Series Red Sox, he's a guy that's going to go out there every 5th day, give your team a chance to win, and give a lot of balls on the ground, which is great when you have Gold Glove caliber guys on the defensive side as well. So I really like what the Diamondbacks are doing. I think nobody's really talking about it. And I think that when you look up at where they finish in 2024, Eugenio Suarez and Eduardo Rodriguez, barring health, should be big parts of the reason why, instead of barely making the wild card, they're possibly in the division race in the NL West. So don't let the Snakes sneak up on you again. I underestimated them last year. I am not going to underestimate them in 2024, especially if they keep making moves like this. I really appreciate each and every one of you who spends part of your Saturday or week with me, Sammy, Ziggy, everybody that's in the chat. Appreciate you for popping in live. It means a lot to me, and I'm just going to continue to keep coming at you every single week till Shohei signs. That will be first base, but bringing up the topics that sometimes it's mainstream, like Juan Soto being traded, and sometimes it's talking about the Arizona Diamondbacks. I appreciate you guys. Hope you guys have a great Solo Shot Saturday and rest of your week. I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.